Good evening. Welcome to tonight's event, Emergency Preparedness with Mental Illness. I am Angela Jameson, CMHRC's Training and Outreach Director, and I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk about emergency preparedness with mental health. CMHRC's mission is to provide guidance and resources for the early identification and management of mood disorders, bipolar disorder, and the newly recognized phenotype thermoregulatory sleep dysregulation disorder, also known as fear of harm. To fulfill this very important mission, we provide a multitude of services for families as well as practitioners and educators. Our diagnostic consultation is an excellent way for families and providers to help ensure an accurate diagnosis. We have community advocacy and also our CMHRC toolkit, which we're very proud of, is a web-based app that tracks symptoms, intensity, frequency, medication history, and compliance, as well as moods and more. You can learn more about our programs and services on our website, cmhrc.org. And if you're interested in them, you can email us directly through the Contact Us page or from any of our website service pages. My colleague Elizabeth, CMHRC's Executive Director, will be monitoring the Q&A this evening, so you can feel free to add your questions and comments there. If you'd like to send us an email and that makes you more comfortable, you can send that to admin@cmhrc.org. Please refrain from raising your hand during the presentation. There will be an opportunity for Q&A at its conclusion. If you'd like to receive a certificate of completion for your attendance at this live presentation, you can request one for a $5 preparation fee. That link will be sent to you tomorrow via an email from Zoom. Let's dive in. While you're here this evening, we are going to describe an emergency preparedness safety plan, give examples of the different items, both necessities and should-haves, to stock in preparation for an emergency, list appropriate resources for a mental health crisis, and identify barriers to emergency preparedness. Last year, in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, our executive director, Elizabeth, who I mentioned earlier, found themselves in a conversation with a parent of a child with bipolar and FOH. That parent was sitting in their car trying to keep their son cool with the air conditioning and cooling spray because the storm had knocked out their power and electricity. But because she lived in a place that should not have seen these extreme effects of Hurricane Helene, and she was not adequately prepared for the aftermath of a hurricane, they both found themselves discussing how and what needed to be prepared for an emergency or extreme circumstances. Emergency planning is a necessity for everyone. We all should be prepared for emergencies. However, it's even more critical for families with children or family members with special medical needs or mental illness. An emergency preparedness plan helps us recognize what type of emergencies could happen near us geographically and in your family. Just as the family that I spoke about at the beginning never imagined they would be facing the extreme effects of a hurricane, there may be natural disasters in your geographic area that you have not thought about. An emergency preparedness plan helps you think about what you will do in those events and those emergencies. Creating this plan before an emergency happens decreases the spiral into panic and allows you to think clearly about solutions before you're in the thick of chaos. It helps you inform loved ones, professionals, and other support people on how to help you and your family during an emergency. The reality is, as parents and caregivers, we do so much that's second nature to us. However, in the event of an emergency, we need others to know how to support us in case we are not there. So this is especially important in extreme situations. If something happened to us as the caregiver, would other people know how to support our children and family? Finally, an emergency preparedness plan helps you think about your your child, and your family's needs in the event of an emergency. Much like thinking about what you would do in advance, this details what you would need so you're not having to think of all that in the midst of chaos. And it will ensure that necessities are not overlooked. Part of this emergency preparedness planning is creating a safety plan. The safety plan is a document you prepare in advance so you can refer to it in a time of emergency. Again, it's that collection of knowledge that you don't have to search for in the midst of chaos. Having something created in advance reduces surprises, reduces confusion, and reduces uncertainty, and it makes sure that everyone knows what needs to be done. This emergency preparedness plan should detail safety needs, mental health issues and needed supports, natural disaster planning, and crisis prevention. And we're going to go over those things in a little bit more detail momentarily. Ideally, you will create this plan together with the members in your household, and you will share it with other members and your child's care team. Again, this is not just for ourselves, it's to make sure that other people know how to step in our absence if something were to happen. When creating this plan collaboratively with the other members in your household, it's really important to discuss individual responsibilities during an emergency. Make sure these are developmentally appropriate and that the person is capable of doing them. But each member of your home should know what their task is. And every task, big or small, is essential in helping stay calm and safe. If people don't know their task, you may find yourself in an emergency and have 15 gallons of water and no food. So the delegation of tasks and making sure everyone is on board is really, really important. Your emergency preparedness safety plan should be updated regularly, at least annually, as changes occur within yourself, your child, or other family members. As you make updates, any changes should be relayed to those same people, to your family and care team, so everyone stays up to date. Again, this plan is not just for you, it's for a person who might have to come in during that emergency, and we want them to make sure that they understand what they need to know and that the information on the document is up to date. It's not going to be helpful if your child's triggers have changed and you don't have that documented, and then something more extreme can happen during the emergency. Again, this document, the Emergency Preparedness Safety Plan, could be quite extensive. There's a lot of information it should include. And it should include crisis prevention information, medical emergency plans, natural disaster or power outage preparation, other family members' specific safety needs, and emergency contact information. And again, we're going to dive further into that as we go. As a parent or caregiver of a child with special needs, one type of emergency that we must prepare for is a mental health crisis or medical emergency. In these situations, having a plan, not just for ourselves again, but for those who may be coming to help us and those who may be interacting with our child or family member, will decrease stress and allow for the quickest path to regulation, and it reduces the likelihood of panic or confusion. Again, this plan is for yourself to stay calm in these situations, but also for those other people coming in. And if you have someone coming in who doesn't know the best techniques to calm your child, that's not going to get to regulation quickly. It's going to add to the confusion and the panic. Crisis prevention and medical emergency information is going to be super important. This is the information that's going to help keep our child and our family members calm during an emergency and in the aftermath of an emergency. So, this information should include triggers, early warning signs, and caregiver responses. Again, as a parent or caregiver, we likely are well tuned into what causes our child to become dysregulated or what are the signs that our child is heading into a medical emergency. But again, what happens if we are not available? Others need to be aware of what to look for and how our child or children or family members react. Do loud noises cause elopement? Does being overheated cause anger? Does your child get extremely sleepy before a medical emergency? As a parent or caregiver, we often just do things out of habit because we know that this is what our child or family member needs. But someone coming in, especially in the aftermath of an emergency, may not know or likely won't know that same information, and they won't be able to pinpoint that this is what's going to cause this. So having that information on paper for other people is going to save a lot of stress during the aftermath and during the chaos of an emergency. When your child is triggered or nearing a medical emergency, what brings them back to a regulated state? Again, as parents and caregivers, we have things in our pockets. We know that child A really needs a drink of water. Child B really loves their fidgets, whatever that looks like. But other people won't know that. And so we need to have listed those coping strategies. Do they need a big glass of ice water, or do they need to be encouraged to shower if that's available? Maybe they like to be left alone. So making sure in that plan there are safe spaces detailed that they can go to and that other people know to look for them there in this event. Perhaps they need to eat something specific. This plan is going to look different for every individual. Every family, every child, every individual has different triggers, has different warning signs, and has different coping strategies. So this is not a one size fits all plan. Finally, you're also going to list support contacts, general support contacts, as well as emergency contacts. The general support contacts are the safe adults that your child goes to in times of distress. Maybe it's a grandma, maybe it's a family friend, maybe it's a neighbor or a teacher. Who are those people that help regulate your child? Those safe adults in their life that can be of assistance. The emergency contacts are going to be part of your mental health or physical health team. It might be your therapist. It could be your physician. If you have different types of therapy, perhaps all of them are listed. And it should also probably include the local hospital so you don't have to look for that information in the event that everything is out of whack and chaotic. Knowing the resources that are available to you and your family during a mental health crisis or a medical emergency is a key piece to staying calm. Some helpful resources include the Suicide and Crisis Hotline. You can call or text this hotline at 988 and speak to a trained counselor who will listen and attempt to determine how the problem is affecting you and then offer support and resources. This is a hotline and a number that even our children should know. They should know that it's available. They should know what it does. And they should know that it's a safe space if they are having a mental health emergency. A similar resource is the crisis text line, and this can be contacted by texting HOME, HOME, to 741-741. Once you've texted that number, again, you'll be connected to a volunteer crisis counselor who will help support you and guide you to a more regulated space. This is another number that we should make sure that our family members and our children know. It's a safe space and a safe outlet for when they are feeling dysregulated. And of course, 911 needs to be utilized if it's an emergency that can't be handled otherwise. Um, if we have tried our coping strategies, if we have tried our general support people, if we have called our physician, our mental health counselor, and we have done all of the pieces, and this is just not able to be regulated, then 911 is an option to help and make sure that everyone stays safe and gets the resources that they need. Natural disasters, like we discussed in the first introduction, or power outages, are other emergencies that you will likely encounter at some point in your life. Just yesterday, we had a huge storm blow in where I'm located, and my daughter called me, Mom, the power keeps going out. It's something that you're going to experience. Now, this wasn't an emergency, it wasn't a huge ordeal, but we should still know what our plan is when that happens. As we've stressed through this presentation, it's essential to be prepared before the fact. We don't want to get to the natural disaster or get the call from our child that the power is out and not have any plans in place. If you have someone in your home, a child or a family member that needs electricity, maybe they're on devices that need electricity or something specific that is helping keep them safe and healthy that needs electricity, contact the power company that supplies your electricity before there are any problems or threats of a problem. In the case of power outages, many companies have assistance programs for their customers that can help with electricity in these types of emergencies. And so you want to contact them prior and get set up that they know you are a priority in getting your power restored or getting you somewhere that has power so the devices that you have can maintain online. Knowing, as we discussed previously, what natural disasters are prominent in your area and what seasons they're likely to occur can be essential in planning. Ignorance is not bliss in this realm, so being familiar can decrease extra anxiety. Now, there is always a chance that something might happen, like the hurricane example, that you thought, I don't live in an earthquake zone. That's never going to happen. Um, but looking at your geographical area and what the possibilities are and planning for those. The goal is never to have to use it, but it's much better to be prepared than to be caught off guard. Locate, follow, and subscribe to the social media channels of local utility companies, local emergency services. There's apps you can put on your phone. So if you don't have Wi-Fi, you can use data to check out the local news and weather alerts. All of those things will eliminate the mad dash for contact information and resources in the thick of chaos. So having it already in one central location and knowing that you are already getting that information in time will eliminate some anxiety and make sure that you are ready to be focused if an emergency happens. Similarly, understanding and knowing the alert system associated with your area will keep you informed prior and during the emergency. Most mobile devices should have wireless emergency alerts enabled. We've probably all been in the situation where we're doing something, our phone's across the room or sitting next to us on a desk, and all of a sudden that loud, obnoxious beep comes through and scares the tar out of you, to tell you that there is an emergency in your area. These alerts are really important to make sure that you are getting the supplies you need in a timely manner, to make sure you understand what's happening in a timely manner. They can be really, really beneficial, even though they might scare the tar out of you when they happen. There is also the National Emergency Alert System that broadcasts announcements from the president on the television, on the radio, satellite digital audio services. Your local, state, or tribal and territory authorities may also have similar systems that you want to be part of. So this is something to look into. You might have to do a little bit of research to know what systems are available for your area, but subscribing to those if that's what it takes, and knowing that if an emergency happens or a natural disaster is coming, that you are getting the most up-to-date information. Finally, know and familiarize yourself with the emergency access and evacuation routes. This, again, is going to decrease panic and chaos, and it's also going to decrease the danger of people going to the wrong space, getting separated from your family. It's going to ensure that everyone stays together, everyone knows where they're going, especially when you have multiple family members. I myself have 5 children. We talk often about, if our house catches on fire, where are you going? If this happens, what are we doing? So we make sure that the people in our home know what the evacuation plan is and where the meetup spot is. So I don't have to go searching for my children in the midst of chaos and trying to maintain my composure and all of the other things as well. Prepping prior to an emergency, and creating an emergency preparedness kit with a stock of food and water will help you feel more in control when disaster strikes. There is nothing worse than something happening and you being like, oh, crud, I don't, we live in a snowstorm state. The snowstorm comes out of the blue. I don't have milk and eggs. That's what everybody goes to the store for, milk, bread, and eggs. So making sure that you have this kit with food and water stocked will save you from that feeling of panic. When you are creating this kit and maintaining it, you want to make sure that you're checking expiration dates and rotating items so they remain current, and safe when an emergency happens. This can be difficult, right? Sometimes I'm not great at rotating items in my regular cabinet. So remembering to do it in an emergency preparedness kit might be a little difficult, but setting an alarm for yourself maybe once every 2 months to check the kit and swap out food that might be going to the expiration date soon is really, really important. When you are creating this kit, you want to think of items in 2 ways: necessary supplies and wanted supplies. So there are items that you absolutely need to have on hand to keep yourself and your family safe. And then there are items that you likely want to have on hand to keep yourself and your family comfortable. Those are 2 very different things, safe and comfortable, but they are both essential items in this kit. You also want to maintain contact information for those general support contacts and emergency contacts that we talked about. Having it all together in one space is going to save you from having to hunt around. I have to go to this file drawer to get contact information. I have to go to this cabinet to get water supplies. Having it all in one space is going to save that having to run around. Again, those general support contacts are the people that you can call in an emergency for help. Those safe people that help regulate, those safe people that know your family, and those safe people who are going to be able to step in and take over if it's necessary. The emergency contacts are going to be those professionals, physicians, mental health professionals, local hospital that you could also possibly need. When you are creating your contact list, it is important to think about adding someone who might live in a different town or area. In this way, if something is just in your geographic region, you have someone who can hopefully be of assistance and is not affected by whatever is happening. Not always possible. It's not always going to work, but it is helpful to have someone who might be out of town or out of your geographic area. Finally, it's really wise as well to create a list of helpful local resources. These resources are going to be invaluable during an emergency. And it's, again, something you're not going to have to look up. You're not going to have to scatter for in the midst of chaos. You know how to use them. You know that they will be available. This could include Red Cross. It could include local food pantries, local shelters. If your safe designated meetup space is not, a neighbor or something, it should also include the address of that area. But this saves you again from having to search during the midst of chaos and having to figure out what you need. Because I'm sure we can all attest to the fact that when you're stressed or when something big is happening, everything leaves your brain, right? I might know all of the local food shelters and or shelters and pantries, but the minute I need them, I suddenly have never heard of a shelter or pantry in my area my entire life. So having it written down saves that from happening. We talked about two different types of supplies. Necessary supplies in your emergency preparedness kit might include flashlight or LED lanterns and extra batteries. They're not going to be very helpful if you pull out a flashlight and the batteries don't work. So pack those extra batteries as well. Candles and matches. Again, a candle might smell nice, but it's not going to help you in the event of an emergency if you don't have a way to light it. First aid supplies in the event of someone getting injured. Chargers and power banks for phones and tablets. I highly encourage having a power bank or a charger that is solar powered because in the event that your electricity has gone out, you're not going to be able to charge a power bank. But they make power banks that can be charged by the sun. They are incredibly helpful, and in this case, would be very useful in many types of emergencies. An emergency radio to stay up to date on what's happening, cooler and ice packs. If your power goes out and you are going to lose the food in your fridge or you're going to lose that coolness, this will ensure that you have a space to put any necessary foods, any medicines that need to be kept cold, and anything essential of that nature. Non-perishable food and water supply. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. But again, making sure that you have those things on hand and you are rotating them regularly so you don't have to make a mad dash for the store with the rest of your area when an event happens. We all remember COVID. We all remember how when it first began, there were things that you couldn't find. And so this ensures that you have the necessities for a small amount of time while everything gets situated. Extra gasoline. I recall a friend who just went through Hurricane Helene talking about how none of the gas stations could maintain their gas supply, and the lines to get gas were exponentially long. And so having a bit of extra gasoline on hand could save you from that and allow you to get out of the area that might be in danger. Essential documents, if there's, a safe that has birth certificates, social security cards, if you have adopted children, adoption decrees, uh, there are so many different things that you can think of when it comes to essential documents, whatever you think might be necessary to have with you. It might even be prudent to get them onto a digital copy so it takes up less space and it's one less thing that you have to carry around and keep track of. Cash, many of us don't carry cash, but having some on hand so in the event of an emergency, you have it available can be really, really beneficial. And then finally, if you have a pet, having the supplies you need for them as well, food, treats, leash, all of those sorts of things. If your pet takes medication, whatever that looks like, those are a necessity to make sure that you have to keep them safe as a member of your family. A special note on medications. It's really wise to reserve a stock of minimum 2 weeks of all medications. This includes over-the-counter medications, aspirin, ibuprofen, Tylenol, that you might take regularly, because in the event of an emergency, pharmacies might be closed. You may not be able to get a hold of your prescriber. There's a number of reasons why you might not be able to get the medications that you need. And we recognize that this is not always as easy as it seems. Depending on insurance restrictions or your type of medication, you can't always fill your medications early and set aside 2 weeks, right? But we encourage you to refill prescriptions on the first day that you're able to refill them, without letting them completely empty, or setting your medications to autofill through your pharmacy. That way you don't have to remember. You don't have to remember to refill them. You don't have to get to the end and be like, oh man, I'm supposed to be making that 2 week supply. So setting it on autofill, and then over time, little by little, it's one here, one there, you can create enough for this emergency supply. As you are creating and maintaining this emergency medication supply, just like the food, it's really important to rotate those medications on a regular basis, to stay current with their expiration date. So same for me, I have to set alarms for everything. So if it means setting an alarm that says check medications and swap, just like the food expiration dates. It might be just knowing every 25th of the month, you're going to check your emergency kit medication, you're going to check your emergency food supply. Whatever that looks like for you, but to remember to update them and rotate them. They're not going to do any good if an emergency happens and you have medication that's 2 years old. So it's important to keep that updated and maintained. Thinking back to the emergency kit supplies as part of your necessary supplies, we've talked a little bit about that stock of food and water. And this might include canned and dried fruit foods. You want to prioritize the foods that can be eaten straight from the can, even if it's not ideal. I can eat some cold green beans or some cold ravioli, and both of those things have good nutritional benefits. So prioritize those types of foods and the foods that have long shelf life. You're going to be checking it regularly. You're going to set that alarm and you're going to check it. But in the event that you don't, because life happens and you forget, in the event that you don't, we want to supply the things that are not going to go bad in a week, right? We're not putting strawberries in our emergency supply kit. So then by the time we get to them, we just have a moldy mess. You want to include bottled water, and this is 1 gallon per day for a 2 week period per person. So if you have a large family, this can be quite a lot. I have 7 people in my family. So when I think of 7 gallons a day for 2 weeks, that's a lot of water. Where am I going to put that? So thinking about how many people are in your household, what that looks like quantity wise, and how you're going to store it. And just like the food, you probably want to rotate the water as well. Not that it goes bad technically, but the longer it sits, you might want to trade it out and just make sure that it's fresh. Other great options are protein bars, bags of nuts, and then thinking about diet specific food needs. Um, if you have a child who is gluten-free or doing ketogenic therapy, having foods on hand that can be helpful to them, because sometimes these diet specific needs are for reasons of I just want to. But other times, these are very significant medical reasons that if our children or family member don't have the food they need, we're going to be facing a whole other emergency. So it's really important to think about that and who you have in your home. Similarly, child specific food needs like comfort or familiar foods. And you might be like, well, that's not a necessity. It is something that's going to help maintain regulation, help bring comfort, and help allow your child to feel not so out of sorts that this event is happening. So it's important to think about that. You might have a child who only eats ramen noodles. So those have great shelf life. Toss them on a shelf and know that if something were to happen, you have their comfort food on hand. And although you're supposed to boil water for ramen noodles, my children sometimes eat it straight out of the package hard. So it has lots of versatility. But thinking about what food does my child eat the most, or what food does my child love that's going to bring comfort and help them feel safe during this time. Once we have moved from our necessary supplies, we can think about those wanted supplies. These are the supplies that are going to help make our children, family members feel comfortable. If we don't have them, this is not the end of the world, but these are things that are going to promote comfort and safety. A non-electric can opener, so you can open those green beans and open that ravioli. Toilet paper and other toiletries. As I was creating this made me laugh because I thought about the ginormous stash of toilet paper I used to have from COVID, and other toiletries as well. In the event of an emergency, and if you're going days into it, you want to feel normal. You want something that's going to bring some normalcy. Having a toothbrush, having a hairbrush, those pieces are going to help bring normalcy, promote comfort, and again, promote safety. A 2 burner camp stove with extra propane burners to allow you for some cooking so you don't have to eat only cold ravioli and green beans. Extra batteries for the flashlight and for other items. Extra clothing, towels, and blankets, maybe a sleeping bag. Again, these are items that are going to promote comfort, are going to help keep regulation and promote safety. Perhaps you have a small generator or disinfectant wipes to keep things clean. Reusable plastic bags or trash bags. These can be used for numerous different reasons. They can pick up waste. They can be coverings if you need shelter. So reusable plastic bags and trash bags are a great resource to have on hand. And then toys, games, or other activities for distraction. And again, this is the wanted category, so it's not essential. But if we have children or family members who have just gone through this major emergency, having something that's going to keep them occupied, having something, again, that's going to create that sense of normalcy is going to bring comfort and going to promote safety. So thinking about that now, I will have a caveat with this. If you have a child who has a special stuffy or lovey or blanket, even though toys, games, blankets, clothing is in the wanted section, there may be some that become a necessity. I have two children who have special loveys. If something were to happen, those loveys are a necessary take for wherever we're going. So thinking about that as well. If you have a child with major sensory needs and clothing is an issue, maybe it's not a want, but a necessity that there's an extra change of clothes in the emergency preparedness kit. So again, this is going to look different for every family, and it's going to be very individualized. Resources that can be useful during a natural disaster or power outage include FEMA's Disaster Assistance Helpline. There is a disaster distress helpline that has a call or a text option. Red Cross. Disasterassistance.gov has a ton of information and opportunities for natural disaster help. And ready.gov also has incredible amounts of information on emergency preparedness and different concepts in regards to emergency preparedness. The phone numbers on this list especially might be extra useful to have written down and in that kit so you don't have to be looking them up in the event of an emergency. If you don't have power, you might not have access to look at the websites, but those phone numbers you will have access to, and so it will be important to have those written down. When thinking about what to include in the emergency contact information of your kit, you're going to think again about family members and general support contacts. And these, again, are the people that are the safe adults or safe people for your child or family members. And you should, as a reminder, think about someone who is not in your general area, someone who could be of assistance if a local disaster happens. That's important to know. You might not have that, and that's okay too. But if you do, it's important to put them on. Emergency contacts are those numbers of your child's care team or family member's care team, healthcare providers, mental health professionals, and even the local mobile crisis unit number. If you don't have that information, I encourage you to look it up for your area and investigate whether or not your area has a local crisis unit, a mobile crisis unit that you can have ready and available in the event that it's needed. And then finally, local resources or national helplines will be useful. Knowing what is pertinent in your area and knowing where they are available can really cut down on the feelings of anxiety if something were to happen. I would also include in this space the contact information of the meeting place that you, your family members, and your children discuss. Maybe that's a neighbor, maybe that's a close shelter, maybe that's your church. Whatever that looks like, have it written down so people know where they're going, but also in the event that disaster happens and someone else needs to come and find your family, they know where they're supposed to be. This kit is not just for you, as we talked about, but it's for all of the other people who might be standing in your stead in an emergency. With that thought in mind, detailing other specific safety needs is really helpful. These are the pieces of information about your child and your family members that others may not know because, again, it just comes so naturally to you. Um, it includes thinking about, does your child have a history of eloping? Are they going to run because they're scared? Are they going to run because they want to find a safe space? Is your child nonverbal and unable to tell someone their needs? In the event of an emergency, are they able to express what the problem is? Does your child have fear-based responses to new people, places, and things? In the event of an emergency, there's probably going to be a lot of new people, places, and things. So, what does their response to that look like? Does your child have aggressive responses to unexpected situations? Certainly, an emergency is unexpected. What is it going to be? How are they going to act? And finally, um, do they have seizures or other unexpected medical events? Similarly, allergic responses to foods, fabric, or environmental factors. As a parent, I know that my child's allergic to peanut butter. I'm not going to offer them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But if there is an emergency and someone else is coming in, and oh my goodness, we haven't eaten in 2 days, here's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They need to know what can and cannot happen to keep everyone safe. Further information that could be really beneficial for someone who does not know your family explicitly includes thinking about medications and are there essential medications that need to be given at a certain time? I have alarms up and down my phone to remind me to give medications to my children. So it will be extra important that I have that information in this plan. Are there medications that need to be refrigerated, that need to be removed if the electricity goes out to the cooler? Or they're going to go bad. Are there medications that need to be given with or without specific foods? Are there medications that have adverse interactions with other medications or foods, or that my child can't have at all? There's medications that my child is not able to have because it could cause bigger problems. And are there medications that have potential adverse side effects that require monitoring? It's important that we're paying attention to these things. If someone is not daily in our life giving the medications to our children, they're not going to know to pay attention to that. Specific safety needs also includes thinking about the individuals who may have access to your family in the case of an emergency. So you might consider, are there trusted individuals who can be counted on to act as temporary guardians? Are there pets that need care and inclusion? And although pets are not individuals, they are parts of our family. So we want to make sure that they are prominent in this plan as well, because we don't want them to be left out to be harmed. Are there firearms or weapons in the home that need to be secured from children or other people? And are there people who should not have access to your family members? Maybe it's a custody order, or maybe it's just someone that is not appropriate. We want to make sure that those people cannot come in this time of chaos and cause bigger problems. Emergency preparedness is more than just the plans you make and the procedures that are followed, right? It's about the people, it's about the relationships, it's about creating a support network and community of people that can help make this process more bearable, that can help make the event of an emergency more bearable. These people can assist you in gathering the needed supplies. They can assist you in helping with your child, helping and encouraging them to utilize healthy coping strategies, and being there to walk side by side with you. But what we recognize and know is that there are specific needs of vulnerable populations that are not being met. Unfortunately, vulnerable populations are often left scrambling because the specific needs of their community are not known. Resource allocation during an emergency and communication strategies might be really well developed, but if it's not responsive to the needs of vulnerable populations, such as the BIPOC community, elderly, LGBTQ community, it's really ill-effective. So continually learning of these for people in the helping positions and adapting to current procedures is the only way to meet the ever-changing needs of a diverse community. Identified most often as a barrier to receiving resources and finances to disaster relief was discrimination. Discrimination because of race, discrimination because of socioeconomic status. It all perpetuates credit issues and it decreases the opportunity for loans for disaster relief. One study recognized that countries with a higher percentage of BIPOC people receive significantly less amounts of resource money and a lower approval rate for small business administration loans in areas with a larger percentage of minorities. So discrimination is real, and as a result, many individuals from vulnerable populations have developed a fear of the government because they don't trust them. They don't trust their ability to help in the recovery process. This is a legitimate concern, being as immigrants and their loved ones are routinely subjected to detention and even deportation. Similarly, the individuals in these marginalized populations often have an inability, an exclusion, or lack of access to be part of the decision-making process. Voter suppression for the BIPOC community and language barriers in other communities increase the difficulty in receiving and understanding resources. Literature posits exclusions to resources and aid due to language barriers are caused by inadequate translation services and a lack of outreach. Reaching these communities is imperative to help them be prepared in an emergency. Finally, the design of relief programs are not conducive to meeting the needs of diverse populations. Very often, the process of applying for aid is super confusing and difficult to navigate with excessive documents, excessive questions to answer, and even once the system has been navigated, it's presented with timelines that were vastly different among populations. These differences in receiving aid forced vulnerable populations to accept buyout offers that were inadequate, and they had to make difficult choices in prioritizing repairs from the emergency. These emergency barriers to emergency preparedness require us to rethink how we approach these issues. Vulnerable populations must be identified and met prior to an emergency. Just like we're creating our plans prior to the emergency, we want to ensure that these populations are met and understood prior to an emergency and actively involved in the process being put into place, and then educated on the importance of things like an emergency preparedness plan, like an emergency preparedness kit, ensuring that they understand what those things are and have access to create them. The systems in place to offer relief, resources, and aid must continually be redeveloped to accommodate all of these changing populations. Unfortunately, even with the best preparation, you can't stop natural disasters or other emergencies from happening. So knowing what to do after the fact is just as important as being prepared. how to support your children and families will help promote effective coping and healing. Initially, ensuring that their basic needs are being met. When a child's basic needs are not met, children's adjustment and resiliency are going to be hampered. They don't feel safe, so they're not going to be able to heal. They're not going to be able to use those coping strategies. The preparation we've talked about through this webinar will help to ensure this is more easily obtained. When you have plans, when you have a stock of water, when you have a stock of food, when you know you have medication set aside, and you have resource information readily available, you'll be more able to continue to meet the basic needs of your family in this event. You want to help your child understand what has happened, talking to them in developmentally appropriate language without giving unnecessary details, right? We don't have to get down to the nitty-gritty, but we're going to be honest and we're going to be developmentally appropriate. Speaking in very concrete terms about what happened, about what might happen next, about the people who are helping to keep them safe. It can ease fears and help regulate emotions. Answer their questions as honestly as possible. Sometimes the most honest answer is, I don't know, and reassure them that their feelings are normal. While you're having these conversations about what has happened, give your child space to grieve the losses they are experiencing. Even if this emergency had no death associated with it or no major extreme loss of life, they may have lost belongings. They may have lost their home. They may have lost the idea of a future. So supporting them in understanding their feelings and letting them know that feelings are okay, they can express their big feelings, and they're not being judged for that. It's important also to understand, especially for our children already struggling with a mood disorder or other healthcare needs, there will be adjustment reactions that might present as somatic complaints or big behaviors. We might suddenly have headaches every day, or we might start tantruming, and that's normal. Looking at these reactions from a lens of understanding and meeting your child where they are will promote safety, will promote healing, and it will open doors for further communication and understanding. Finally, if your child's fears, distress, adjustment reactions persist longer than you feel comfortable, or you simply don't feel as if you're able to answer those questions in a healing way, there is no shame in seeking professional guidance. Knowing that a mental health professional can help you in answering the questions, as well as aid your child in finding skills to help ease their fears, is really, really positive. I'm so excited that you joined us this evening for Emergency Preparedness with Mental Illness. We'll open the floor for discussions in just a moment, but if you would like to dive deeper into this topic, please join us on August 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern for our Wayfinder discussion group. The Wayfinder discussion group was created to deepen understanding in community. So we would love to see you there to keep talking about emergency preparedness and how we can benefit our children and families. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. We're here to help. CMHRC has numerous programs and resources that we discussed in the beginning of this session. They are there to support you. You can find links to those popular options here, or you can go to our website at www.cmhrc.org to see everything that's available. None of those programs, however, would be possible without the generous gifts of our sponsors. As a 501c3 organization, we run on your support. So if you would like to continue to make our resources available for all populations, please consider donating 25 and 25. Finally, the next couple of slides are references used in creating this presentation. If you're interested in receiving a copy of the full presentation, including these slides, you will have that opportunity through the email that comes tomorrow via Zoom. We're so glad that you're here this evening to talk about emergency preparedness with mental illness. We're now going to dive into our Q&A with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, are there any questions that came in that you held on for discussion?
There are, and I just want to say thank you to everyone for contributing your questions and for being patient. I did not answer most of them. I held them because I thought they were great questions for conversation. And so one of the more concrete questions was, how do you get a 2-week reserve of controlled medications such as methylphenidate? That is a great question that we get a lot when we talk with folks about this. And I want to say that this is a circumstance where you're going to have to collaborate with your prescriber. You're going to have a conversation with them about what is going to happen when there's an emergency and we can't get a refill on our medication. This happens actually a lot, not only because of national crises or weather emergencies or the like, but it can also happen because of distribution shortages and manufacturing shortages. So, for example, levothyroxine, which many folks who have bipolar disorder take because the medications that they take for their disorder can impact their thyroid. Levothyroxine has had a national shortage of late, and so people have been scrambling trying to get enough. If you work with your prescriber ahead of time, what you can do is you can build in a plan for how to slowly accumulate enough so that you have an emergency stockpile. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have 100 of your methylphenidate set aside. This is really just for this 14-day period that is most commonly recommended that you have emergency supplies for. So an example for methylphenidate might be that many prescribers often recommend the periodic vacation from the stimulant. So perhaps during a school vacation, on a weekend, during some time where your child is able to be regulated without it, they take a day or two off from taking that methylphenidate. Talk to your prescriber whether or not that's an appropriate strategy for your child. And if it is, then perhaps if they take a day off once a month, then after a year, you will have an extra 12 days worth of methylphenidate set aside. So that is one strategy for medications that are controlled substances and have strict regulations on how they're prescribed. Another question that we had here was sort of along the same lines. It was asking about just why do we need that much water? um, which is a great question as well. And the answer to that is pretty simple. We need all that water because we use water for more than just drinking. We use water for bathing. We use water for cooking. We use water for brushing our teeth. We use water for a lot of folks who have fear of harm, they use water as a cooling strategy. So one of the things that you want to make sure when you have all this water is that you understand what it is that you're going to be using it for. You may need it to clean something. And so it's important to have that water. But I also tell people when they panic about, oh no, what do we do about not having enough water? Where do I store it? Well, we all keep beverages in our home, right? And if you have a large family and you have kids, most people usually have a little bit of extra. So you don't have to only drink water during an emergency. If you have bottles of Propel, if you have bottles of Gatorade, if you have the powdered mixes that create electrolyte drinks, you can actually reduce, well, maybe not with the powders, but you can reduce the number of gallons of water that you need to have on reserve if you have other beverages in the house to keep yourself and your family hydrated. Um, Another question that I wanted to throw out, Angela, is one of the things that someone said towards the beginning was, I'm scared to call 911 in an emergency because I'm afraid about how the police might respond to my child during a mental health crisis because my child can become aggressive. How do other
Mhm.
people handle that? I was wondering if you wanted to take a crack at answering that.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid concern. I have shared the same concern about my children. And actually, I just had to call 911 recently, not um, so much for a mental health crisis, but for my child. And I handled it by just being honest, right? I think that they want to know up front what they're coming in for. And so I said to them, listen, my child has autism, my child has bipolar. If he feels threatened, if he feels like he is cornered, this is how he might react. Maybe he won't, but I want you to know that you might see this. And it's not him being aggressive to hurt you, it's not him trying to fight you. This is his safety response because of what he's dealing with. And actually, in my situation, the police officers were incredible. Thankfully, it didn't escalate, but allowing them to know ahead of time, I think, is really beneficial. In an ideal world, all of our police would come with mental health professionals for a mental health crisis and know how to handle that, or they would all have training on that. But unfortunately, we don't live in that ideal world. So I think it's up to us as parents and advocates for our children to make sure that they understand what the symptom presentation might be, what it might look like, and how the best way to handle it, right? Like for us was like if you try to restrain him, it's going to get infinitely worse. So that's not how to handle it. And presenting that information up front, I think, can help. But it is a very valid and real concern because we, again, know how to handle our children and family members. We do it all day long. And opening that door and allowing someone else to come in to do that can be scary.
So another question that we had here was that, oh, someone just popped something in the chat in the Q&A, said, I'm a crisis responder, and this would be a perfect situation for a co-responder and or a mobile crisis responder who are mental health responders. Absolutely. I'm not going to call this person out by name, just because we like to protect everyone's privacy on our because these webinars are made public. But to the person who wrote that, please come to our Wayfinder meeting next Tuesday on the 26th. I think your perspective on this would be very, very valuable. We have met with emergency responders, EMTs, and paramedics in the past who've been able to give us some great advice on how to handle situations like this. And so if you would like to join us on Tuesday evening, we would be grateful for your additional input. Um, so one other question that has come in is about differentiating between a medical crisis and a mental health crisis, and how do we do that? And Angela, would you like to sort of share from a professional standpoint how we approach that?
Honestly, I approach every situation as mental health
Mhm.
because mental health is physical health. They are connected, they are combined. And so if I'm walking into a situation and assuming that there is something mental health going on, I can then approach it in a way that's going to be safe, that's going to be trauma informed, that's going to allow the person to feel safe and comfortable. And then we can weed out what needs to happen next. So I think it's not as necessary to differentiate per se as it is to approach in an empathetic, trauma informed way so you can get the information you need to bring the person to stability.
Excellent. I love hearing you say mental health is physical health. They really are interchangeable, especially when we start to understand the biological underpinnings of a lot of disorders that we think of typically as being psychiatric, but are much, much more complicated than that. Um, I have another question here that I want to share something in response, and that is we have a question here that where a person was wonderfully honest and said, "This all seems really overwhelming. What do I?" Whoops, I think I shared that incorrectly. What do I? Where do I start? What tool do I have for being able to make these kinds of emergency plans for my family? And so here I'm going to try sharing this again. Um, we have created an emergency preparedness plan that is 2 sheets of paper, front and back each, that allows you to track and keep track of the information that you need to have and that we've talked about and Angela has explained so beautifully in this presentation. It goes through like what is your family's name, your address, your phone number, who are your primary emergency contacts, what is the relationship between you and that contact person, a list of your family members, in case of a fire or a flood or some kind of other natural disaster. The emergency responders may not know how many people live in your house, how many pets you have who need to be cared for, and so having a list of them is a very practical thing to do. You can list your plans in case of a natural disaster, in terms of a power outage. You can list your family circle of support. That's the term that we use for those trusted adults in your life, in your family, in your community, who you can turn to for support. We also have a crisis intervention plan here that looks at triggers, warning signs, coping strategies, um, and medical emergency plans. What are the early warning signs? For example, with seizures, many people experience auras. They know when they're going to happen. What do you need to do when your child says to you, "I think I'm going to have a seizure"? Being able to be prepared. We have on here already some of these disaster helplines that Angela shared earlier. And we also have spots here for people to add emergency contacts, everyone from a spouse, a sibling, a parent, to your therapist, to your local hospital. On page 3, we have a place for you to document what are the medications that you or your family members have to take. What special medical equipment do they have? Do they have to have a, a, something to help them breathe? Do they have uh, do they have an insulin pump that needs to make sure that its battery is charged? What's the medical equipment? You can list that here, and you can also list safety needs that Angela talked about earlier, elopement, and the like, to put it down so that people who may be there to help your family, who don't know your family well, will have the information that they need. And lastly, on the last page, there's a way to keep track of the supplies that you need, to have as needed supplies and as wanted supplies in your emergency preparedness kit. If you would like a copy of this, we can send it to you. Just reach out to us at admin@cmhrc.org. We also have someone else here who is talking about their own particular state that has what's called a 2 weeks ready program that breaks all of this down into smaller pieces, so that you can make sure that your emergency responders know, if you have someone in your family who has special needs, who's nonverbal, who may not respond the way that is expected, when spoken to by an authority figure. And that's really important. If you are comfortable being able to go, as Angela said, to your firehouse, police station during non-crisis times, introducing yourself, explaining that you have a child or a family member who may not behave or respond as expected to them is a great way to get that, as Angela said, the relationship building that is so important in being prepared for a emergency.
I think on a similar note as well, making those visits with your children can be beneficial too. Sometimes our children are afraid of the firemen and the police because of what they hear in stories, or because maybe they know their reactions in situations, and so they're afraid that it's going to escalate or get worse. And so allowing them to be part of that relationship building and create a safe connection with those people, so in the event of an emergency, when they see them, it won't be so alarming.
And I'm going to go ahead and put in the resource into the chat feature that was provided by this person who is here viewing the session. So that is going out to everyone right now for you to take a look. Another question we had that came in was, what if a person's coping strategies aren't available during an emergency? Angela?
I talk a lot about this with my daughter, who has some coping strategies that aren't always going to be available. And I think that the piece here is creating a strategy toolkit that has strategies that can be used in all different situations. And so we talk a lot with my daughter specifically, like, okay, I recognize this is your go-to strategy. I recognize this is what you want. But if you don't have this, what's next? And so creating that toolbox of, they need a radio and headphones. Well, if you run out of electricity, that might not be beneficial. So maybe they need a drum pad so they can beat out their own beat, whatever that looks like. But creating different opportunities and then helping them use those opportunities outside of the emergency, because it's not going to work if they've never used it before and then suddenly they're in the midst of chaos. So talking about what else can work and then creating opportunities to use those other things outside of the moment.
Absolutely. A crisis is not the time to suddenly be confronted with something brand new that you've never seen before.
No.
So practicing those alternative coping skills in non-crisis times is very key. Thank you for underscoring that. There's one last comment here that I want to mention. This is one thing I did right. This person wrote, one thing I did right the day before a hurricane hit was filling bags and bags full of water in Ziploc bags and putting them in the freezer. I want to applaud this person for this idea. We don't have to do things perfectly for them to be effective. And so there's a lot of times where I remember being in a hurricane once myself, where I just filled up the bathtub the day before and said, no one go in there. Your local emergency responders will often have, or the water company may have bags that you can use to fill up water from your tap. So if you know that there is a hurricane or something else coming, or that it's tornado season where you live, or that earthquake could hit at any time, what you can do is you can get these deflatable bags from your water company, and then you can just fill them up with tap water, seal them up, and set them aside ahead of time so that you don't have to go out and buy a lot of bottled water. You can have that as a resource set aside. But yes, Ziploc bags, pots and pans, bathtubs, buckets, you name it. If it can hold water, you can use it. I think this person also mentioned putting them in the freezer because then if you lose power, you have ready-made ice packs that can go in your cooler. And you again don't have to have gone out to buy uh, gel packs or other types of artificial cooling things, and they won't take up space in your freezer the rest of the year. So thank you for that suggestion. Again, anyone who's interested in talking more, swapping ideas, sharing information and resources with one another, please consider coming to our Wayfinder event, which will be happening on Tuesday evening. I'm going to put a link to the registration for that in the chat. It is a free event. It will be hosted by two folks from our community who have lived this and are going to be moderating the conversation. You will all be able to be uh, off mute, on camera, and able to engage with one another for an increase in your sense of community. And that, I think, was all of the questions. If there's anything else that anyone has to share, please do come to our Wayfinder meeting on Tuesday. Angela, was there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
I just wanted to say, that person said the one thing I did right. I think it's important to remember that none of us are truly prepared for an emergency. That's why it's called an emergency. And so we do everything we can ahead of time to try and prepare to make it less chaotic. But the reality is there's going to be chaos. There's going to be things that hindsight's 2020. We look back, hopefully afterwards, and it's like, oh, I really didn't do that well. But that's the nature of what an emergency is. And so we're doing this preparing to help decrease the amount of stress and decrease the amount of anxiety for ourselves and for our families and our children. But again, the reality is we won't ever be 100% prepared. And that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I just want to remind everyone that next month, our webinar in September on the 17th is called the Discipline and Limit Setting with Children Who Have Mood Disorders. So please feel free to sign up for that free event. And next week, our clinical seminar on Wednesday afternoon, 5 p.m. Eastern, is on differentiating bipolar disorder from trauma in clinical practice. So we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great rest of your night. Angela, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all again soon. If you have any questions, please reach out to admin@cmhrc.org. Good night.